This is the first one I'm doing where I actually combined Rudolf Steiner's work with Michael Rice. Sergei Prokofiev, he kind of uses, he speaks through Steiner. He uses his quotes. If you read his book, it's on the table somewhere. Yeah, it's the occult. Yeah, I'm going to pass it around if you want. Significance of forgiveness. I wouldn't say I recommend it, but it has a lot in there. It's a little hard to read. But in any case, my name is Riccio, originally from New York City. I've been here for a number of years. I went to a Waldorf school, and I eventually studied Anthroposophy in Germany. I was very curious about what Steiner had to say. And a number of years later, I ran into the work of a guy called Michael Rice. He actually used to give free workshops here in Hawaii. He hasn't been here in about a decade. I guess what tonight I'm going to answer the question is, why is forgiveness so difficult? And based on what Steiner has to say and Michael Rice has to say, actually most of us don't even know what forgiveness is. And the complication goes back, especially according to Michael Rice, that in the Greek language wasn't able to translate what the Aramaic language wanted to say. So in the Greek language, forgiveness was something like let someone off the hook. And in the Aramaic language, which evidently Jesus and I guess 5 of the world's religions sprang out of the Aramaic language, it has a whole nother feel to it, and that's what I'm going to try to work through tonight. I wasn't so sure who my audience was, but I have to do my due diligence. I'll take you through a quick overview of Steiner's work. Is anyone here who doesn't know who Rudolf Steiner was? 1 or 2? Okay, I guess the quick version, I'll go backwards. He died in 1925. Before he died, he was a spiritual teacher. He was the founder of the Waldorf School. At the time, he also developed a form of organic farming, which is still practiced, called biodynamic farming. He was a scientist by training. There are very few things that Steiner didn't do except write a novel, and maybe that's a good thing. He wrote some plays, which are probably worth reading from a certain point of view. Sergei Prokofiev, you might recognize the name. He's the grandson of the composer, so if you like Peter and the Wolf. He was born in Russia, and he discovered Steiner's work, and then later, through his commitment, became one of the leaders of the Anthroposophical movement, Steiner's movement in Germany. Let's see, what else can I add? Prokofiev died recently, I think about 7 years ago. That was kind of a shock, and what makes him important is he was able to, for example, Steiner never said or wrote an essay on forgiveness. So if you want to know what Steiner said, unfortunately you have to read 19 of his books, and he gave about 5,000 lectures. So it's a real problem. What did Steiner say? And the lectures weren't kind of sorted out according to topic. So something about forgiveness might be in the lecture on bees. I mean, you just don't know where you'll find it. And Prokofiev sifted through it, and he took out the key quotes, and he put together a pretty good book. It's really hard to be a Steiner researcher. So what I'm going to do now is I'll quickly take you through this. Before I do that, let me pass these out.
What was the title of Prokofiev's book?
Prokofiev's book, The Occult Significance of Forgiveness. It's running around. It's back there. So I would like to just go through a quick thing with you. It's a Steiner quote, where in fact Steiner gives the basic mechanics of forgiveness, but he doesn't actually tell you how to do it in any detail. And the quote is right here. I have trouble sometimes reading. Steiner says this in reference to teaching. He says, and it's in Knowledge of Higher Worlds, if I'm a teacher and my pupil does not fulfill my expectations, I must not divert my resentment against him, but against myself. So if you get angry at your pupil, put it against yourself, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because if a bad boy is a bad boy, he's a bad boy. I must feel myself as one with my pupil, to the extent of asking myself, is my pupil's deficiency not the result of my own action? Instead of directing my feelings against him, I shall rather reflect on my own attitude, so that the pupil may in the future be better able to satisfy my demands. So what are the 4 steps? You have an expectation of something or someone, that someone should behave the way you want. Then you realize you resent them. And then you realize if you reflect on your resentment and change your attitude towards the person you resent, you'll have a new relationship. So Steiner said that much, and then he goes on to talk about something else. But it's exactly that step where if you're not happy with your child or your loved one, it's because you haven't changed yet. That's the basic assumption. And it's a hard assumption to eat, right? So if you want to heal someone, heal yourself first, kind of like that. And so I'll just leave you with that, and we'll come back to it. But for those who are not familiar, I'm going to give you a short version of Steiner's creation myth. So, and this is how forgiveness fits in. So once upon a time, there were all these angel hierarchies, and we were floating around with them. And one day, God said, so there's 9 hierarchies, and God basically said, look, you guys are kind of low-caste angels. If you go and live on the earth and succeed at loving each other, I'll make you the 10th hierarchy, right? And we said, sure, that sounds great. We're just going to go down to earth, and what do you do when you're on earth, right? You go with a big sense of mission that you are going to succeed. And what do? What's the first thing you do when you reincarnate? You forget everything you promised, right? And when you're in your earthly body, all these things come up. And then you excarnate, and you try to remember what you're supposed to do, and then you end up killing your brother and doing all these things and saying things you didn't mean. And then you promise that next time around, you're going to get it right. And you're going to get it right. And you're going to get it right. And you have all these hierarchies of angels helping you in every which way they can to remind you to do one thing, right? Just be loving. Just try that. And we promise, right? But the soup is thick down here, right? And we forget what we're supposed to do. So what gets built up over incarnations? What's that?
Exactly.
Your karma, right? And karma can be negative and positive. So what's the positive part of reincarnating? Give you $5.
Get to try again.
Okay, you get to try again, but what's the real positive part? Releasing. Okay, wait, you can actually do well and love people, right? Sometimes that happens in an incarnation, right? And when you use your love in the service of knowledge, you develop, right? So not all the incarnations are a waste of time. A lot of times, that was supposedly Steiner's point between Eastern and Western reincarnation. Eastern, it was always a punishment to come back here. But some of us like it down here. It's fun. We get chances to improve ourselves and share our gifts. But like you said, there's karmic buildup. And Prokofiev says there is, in fact, so much karmic buildup that the time we live in, if you look at all the cycles of time, right? So we're in our 5th cycle and the 4th section, et cetera, we're in kind of trouble. So helpers were sent to get us out of this karmic mess. And who was the most recent helper? Anybody familiar? Who? Michael is a helper, sure. And then there's kind of the heavy-duty helpers, people who carry your karma. Who's carrying our karma, according to Rudolf Steiner? It's not Mahatma Gandhi, I don't think. I've heard that answer. It's pretty good, right? So you have it. Steiner is pretty Christ-centered. So you have Christ and a man called Christian Rosenkreuz, right? And they're waiting for us. They're holding our karma because it's heavy. And if they didn't hold it, the whole earth would probably fall apart, right? So what Prokofiev's saying is, so everybody's carrying us now, and we need to do our own work. And we get sent a lot of helpers. Not all of them are talked about. There's a lot of people on this earth that are carrying us. And so what Prokofiev says he says we need a new way of life, that this way of forgiveness is essential to every spiritual path. And if you're not doing forgiveness, you're not really moving on your karma. Because if I did something to you or you did something to me, and there's no cutting of the cords, as the Aramaic says, no cancellation, then what happens in our next life if we don't cancel out what we did to each other? Right? We keep getting redrawn. And we get redrawn together for negative reasons. So Prokofiev says, look, trust me, work on your forgiveness. Number one, your lower ego is too strong. You're all selfish, basically. And you can overcome that selfishness through forgiveness, right? And then he says, look, you have a social life, you have life between people. And the grease that makes it flow is forgiveness. And you won't be able to really work together in the way that you're designed to do. And then he brings it onto a karmic mission. You have people that you come to the earth to meet. You have a mission, but because of karma, you never get the mission going. It's never completed. And those who are familiar with Steiner's karma lectures, and there's other seers who also talk about this, a lot of stuff never came to the earth that was supposed to come, right? And then when that happens, the education is not there, and the little kids never become the people they're supposed to become. So this has, according to Prokofiev, horrible consequences, their inability to cooperate, which forgiveness would smooth out. And then, of course, a question of evil, but I won't go into any detail because it's already getting a little heavy. Now, Prokofiev ends this section with a very interesting thing. If you choose just to remain a good person, you know, you pay your taxes, you go to church, you don't hit your wife or whatever else, you can become a servant. And then he says, and he quotes the Bible on this one, that's why, you know, the Quakers are called friends. It says in the Bible, if you really connect and you forgive, you'll become a friend of Christ, and he'll basically whisper to you all his secrets. It's, I think I put that on the paper. So what Prokofiev is looking for is that we recognize that we're friends of Christ and that we're carrying this mission of forgiveness. It has important consequences for everything we do. Any questions about that so far? Okay, let me tell you, yeah?
Just where did you get all that?
This?
Yeah.
Well, there's several sources, like it's kind of taken out of Hinduism or Theosophy, but according to Steiner himself, he was a clairvoyant. So he was pretty clear that he was cleaning up the mistakes of others. That was one of the themes of his life. So, yeah, he's kind of a polymath, and he didn't shy away from going into areas that maybe he wasn't trained in. But also, as a clairvoyant, it's really clear from his lifestyle that he was a real special clairvoyant. One person said that I saw in a lecture, they said Steiner's gift was really to see so far back to the beginning and the end. And that was a special gift that had never really been revealed to people publicly. At the time Steiner was lecturing, most of this knowledge was in secret societies. So Steiner printed these books with Blavatsky, and all of a sudden in Europe, all of these secret groups came out of the closet. Rosicrucians, all these weird groups in Austria, everywhere. People were publishing what they knew, which wasn't the case because the church would persecute you, or, you know, Freemasonry hadn't always have a happy ending, right? So, yeah, so this is basically, if you go from here to Hinduism, they'll talk about epochs and times and missions that people had to accomplish. But he does differ substantially from that. Lost my train of thought. One second. Prokofiev talks about modern man's kind of dilemma. And he talks about it in the terms of two people. One is, I believe he was a Jewish doctor in Poland during the Nazi occupation, and he watched his family was executed in front of him. And what he decided was, at that moment, after seeing his family exterminated, he says, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be an angry person. And from that point on in his life, he was put in a concentration camp. When the Americans liberated him, he was in perfect shape. He was almost a sub-director of the camp. He was so likable. He had so much energy, even though he was on a starvation diet. And the GIs called him Bill Cody, I guess, because he looked like Bill Cody. But yeah, so he's a remarkable person who never held it against the Nazis for what they did, although it was so horrible. And then, so he's kind of your archetypal forgiveness man, that through no matter what you go through, you can still keep your dignity and love. You'll always kind of this gesture that you're always going to be in love with humanity and helpful. Opposed to him is what Prokofiev says is the average man's dilemma, is Wiesenthal. Wiesenthal was in a hospital, a German soldier was dying. This German soldier had killed, I guess, Jewish people in a church. They locked them in, or in the synagogue, and they let it burn. And this German soldier was on his last leg, and he told the doctor, I would like to talk to a Jewish person. Wiesenthal was sent up. Wiesenthal said, this is what I did. Could I just hear a word of forgiveness before I die? And Wiesenthal was silent. You know, he's like, how do I forgive you? He wasn't sure, or he wasn't comfortable. Should I forgive him or not forgive him? And Prokofiev says, this is who you are. Could you forgive the Nazi? Right? And that's the problem right there. That's modern man's dilemma, is the Wiesenthal dilemma. Am I right not to forgive? You know, all these questions of rights and supposed to's, and revenge, etc. So when we go into the next section, I'll go into kind of how forgiveness takes place in the anthroposophical view of man. Excuse me. Sorry for the mass confusion. It's also on your handout. Is anyone not familiar with the human being according to Rudolf Steiner? There are 9 parts. So I'll just give you a quick, everybody knows what a body, soul, and spirit is, right? Jesse, is this okay? Sure. Okay. So you have your body, right? And your body has a life force, and it also has a sentient force. That's your daily experience, right? You don't usually climb out of that. You're in your muck every day. You go to the bathroom, you eat, you walk around. Then you have a soul, and Steiner briefly outlines 3 types of soul. There's a part of you that has an artistic soul that loves harmony. There's a soul that you have that's argumentative, right? And that's necessary, right? And then you have a soul that's scientific and seeks agreement. Steiner, or Prokofiev, calls this your lower ego. You identify with your body, with your health, with your pain. You know, this come up. And it's your lower ego, that's your daily consciousness. And your lower ego is capable of a lot of great things, as it kind of says there, in terms of science and etc. And this is the interesting part Prokofiev says. Prokofiev says that in order for forgiveness to take place, it can't take place in your normal lower ego. And why is that? Yeah?
Because it's not, it doesn't make sense. It's not an intellectual kind of process, and it goes against your feelings and certainly. So it's sort of contradictory to all of your lower ego beings.
Yes, absolutely. It's contradictory to your lower ego. So in a certain sense, we're all kind of selfish. We don't want to forgive. It's much easier to forget. And so Prokofiev says, through an act of will, we bring the spirit self, which in Christianity is sometimes called your Holy Spirit, your guardian angel. And in Hinduism, it's called your manas. And what it is your higher consciousness actually has 3 aspects. So you have your true self, your higher self, That's your God self, which you haven't realized yet. Then you have your life spirit, which also in Hinduism is called your Buddhai. And that's the spirit that helps you make good choices. So the good choices are whispered to your spirit self, and your spirit self is what interacts with your lower ego. So your spirit self is talking to you all the time. You're just, playing video games, whatever else you do in your free time, getting busy at work, and your spirit self is telling you stuff, and your Atman is getting really bored with you, right? Because you never listen, you never expand. And so this spirit self is dying to intervene in your life. But 90% we close off through our drugs, our food, just anything, our loving to talk in front of people, right? So that's all lower ego stuff, as you said before. And so what Prokofiev says, he says, if this spirit self, this higher self, is able to affect the lower ego, then forgiveness can take place. Now, if you look at it backwards, normally, what happens when you don't pay attention when you drive?
Accident.
If you don't have an accident, actually you go somewhere where you usually go, not where you're supposed to go. So there's part of your astral body that always wants to do the same thing, comfortable, go to sleep anywhere, right? So your astral body is kind of your dream consciousness. If you're completely dreaming, then all your impulses just sneak out. And Prokofiev says you're not going to find any forgiveness below the belt. It has to come from someplace higher. And so in Waldorf school, they say if you want to change the kid's physical body, you do some kind of movement. If you want to change the kid's movement body, you work on their emotion. So Prokofiev says only a higher aspect of you can affect a lower aspect. And it's a pretty sound pedagogical principle, right? You don't fix your back problems by just hammering them away. That's one way to do it. But usually you go for a massage, or if it's a psychological problem, you talk about it. So you go from the higher to the lower. So when you bring your spirit self in, your lower ego is what has your memory, whether conscious or unconscious. So if you did me wrong, I'll hold on to that. Even if I don't remember, I'll have some resentment to you. And Prokofiev says, when this spirit self comes down, the memory is suspended and in some level erased. Does that make sense? And then you have this moment of forgiveness. And I'll just end quickly, this Prokofiev aspect is incredibly hot in here. If you look, Prokofiev says there's basically 4 levels of forgiveness. The first one most of us have is tolerance. We tolerate other people, right? And that comes out of our lower ego. It's just reasonable. Be tolerant, people will tolerate you. Then Prokofiev says the real forgiveness happens when the spirit self affects your lower ego. And he says the first thing you notice is people's auras shine, their life body, all the darkness is moved on. And that's what happens is when someone's constantly working on their forgiveness, there's actually health benefits, vitality. The next step says, Prokofiev, if you really are in a complete forgiveness mode, your life spirit, which is a little higher up, develops. So that all of a sudden you're given a different energy field. Then you have the ability to take on the karma of people you know. So if someone is suffering and you can do that, you can actually help them along through their pain. So this is a really important achievement. And then finally, way in the future, if you go back to that model we had, you'll actually be able to carry the karma of humanity. And that's a goal we all have to look forward to. That at the end of the cycle of incarnation, we should be carrying each other. Is that okay? Any questions about that? Okay, everybody turn to your forgiveness sheet. Are you guys super hot or is it just me?
You.
It is? Oh, thank God, it's like baking. I'm dying here and I keep thinking no one can tolerate this much heat. Okay, let me tell you about Michael Rice, and then we'll get to our sheets. The title of Michael's book is Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Right? And the basic theory is, if there is something that you have not dealt with, consciously or unconsciously, in a way that kind of Prokofiev is talking about, that trauma, or that learned behavior, or that pain, will affect the way you see the world. So let me give you an example. If you see a picture of a house, one person will think of, oh, I remember my childhood, how comfortable that was. Another person will say, I was abused in the house, and they shake. You're like, well, it's just a house. Why are you shaking? Because it's bringing up something unconscious for them. So we have different associations to the same objects, right? And so what Michael Rice says, but why is that? Why does our past trauma affect the way we see the world? And then what are we going to do about it? And the first thing Michael starts off with is he says, have you ever held a newborn baby? And what do you feel when you hold a newborn baby? Does he criticize you? No, right? It's perfect love. He's not loving you, he just is love, right? So Michael Rice says, how do we come back to this kind of just this loving condition? And this is where he criticized the Greeks. He says that in the Bible it never says to love God and love your neighbor. What it says, according to Michael, is be in a resonating state of love in your neighbor's presence, no matter what your neighbor does. And if you can maintain that presence of love, which he later calls Rahma, you will have bliss. Right? And so he's using the Aramaic text. There were almost no Aramaic copies left over. They made sure they got rid of all the Hebrew Bibles, etc. in the New Testament, right? And there's a reason for that. So we got stuck with the Greek. So let's go on to our first example. What happens when your boss passes you off for a promotion?
You feel dejected.
Okay. But why do you feel dejected?
You thought you deserved it.
You thought you deserved it, right? So what did Steiner say? What's the cause of our pain?
I think it's the boss.
Okay, in what way do you think it's the boss? Because that's important. What did the boss do?
He did not promote you.
He did not promote you. And what's the illogical part of that? So if your boss didn't promote you, right? So no promotion. How does that then make you feel a certain way? What's the connection?
Well, you think it's his fault. You blame the boss for your feelings.
Okay, so you have a feeling and then you blame him.
Which has to do with expectations, right?
It has to do with expectation.
That you expected you were good enough to get that promotion.
Right.
So that expectation is what was happening.
So you go from the expectation and then where do you end up from the expectation?
Bitter hell of blame.
Okay, so you end up in blame. And then so what Michael says to you, now where does the blame go?
In your body.
In your body. And then you start having pains. So what's the purpose of pain? Probably an obvious answer in this crowd. Right? So pain tells you you're doing something that's disintegrating you, right?
Information.
Yeah, it's information to tell you to stop. Right? Try to tell any of us that for that matter. So what Michael says here, if you have an expectation, why does it take you out of that Rahma, or the childlike love? Why must you allow your expectation to take you out of love? Does that help any of you? No, it's a good point, right? Let's try another one. Does anybody have a spouse who criticizes them? Yeah? What do? Do you show them who's right? Go do that. What do?
Defensive.
You get defensive. What kind of energy is defensive energy?
Negative.
Yeah. So what does it do to you?
Makes you feel negative.
Right. And so what Michael ends up saying is that not only do we carry our own trauma, we carry the trauma of our ancestors. I'm part Southern Italian. Have you ever been there? I said I could account for about 25% of my behavior, although I've never really been there very long. So there's a genetic memory, and Michael says it will go back all the way back to Adam and Eve. Because if not one person in your genetic line has forgiven certain things, it will be given to your kids. And we go back to the picture of the earth. Now we have these million generation of people who've been jealous, angry, murderous, and all of a sudden you think the next generation is going to be better when none of us have done our work. And Michael says it's crazy. Only a crazy person thinks that. So you're brought to this earth by age 4. You can't figure out. You know, age 4 you're already not in love. 4-year-olds are confused. They have stress. They have ADHD medication. That's a far away from that childlike love that we first had. So this is what Michael suggests you do. Oh, I have another trigger for you, just so you know. Donald Trump. Did you ever see how people are crazy they're getting? Right, you say that name, right? What does that mean about them if they can't? See, Michael's not saying if you're like, you have a little reaction, you're a little dissatisfied. He's saying this is a trigger. You get triggered. You hear Trump and you get triggered and they won't stop talking about how hard the world is coming to an end. Where is that in that person? What's going on? Who's Donald Trump for them?
Satan.
What's that?
Satan.
Satan, right? And where is Satan in them? Because if you are making a claim with just these 5 bits of your brain, when you have 10,000 possible, and you're making a claim about Donald Trump, who are you talking about? Your own damage, yeah. So what? Donald Trump's not the first bad politician we've had in the history of mankind, right? Or a good one, however you want to see it. So Michael wants you to look for these clues in your life. And when you have these clues, he wants you to pursue them. Are you jealous of your brother? Steve, are you jealous of your brother? No, okay. But if you're just jealous once, what's the typical thing that we do in our culture? And this is important. In Japanese culture, this is fantastic. In Anglo-American culture, we have a culture of denial. Oh, I'm not mad at her. Really? No, yeah, because we smooth everything over. But every time you find a gem where you're jealous, angry, etc., Michael says, now it's time to do your work. Don't let that go. That's going to be passed on to your children. You have to do your work. Nobody wants you to, what's the word? If you don't start cleaning up somewhere, this becomes so dominant there's no way out. And remember, what does Steiner say? If you want to change in someone else, you have to have a change in yourself, right? So this is the first step. Let's see. I had other things planned, but let's go right to the forgiveness sheet. Everybody, let's try it. There are 2 forgiveness sheets. There's this one. There's a long version, and then the next page is a short version. See this short version? And I'll take you through it. The first line is, if I'm in pain, I'm in error. Does everybody see that? I want to change the way I feel and react to others. I will cancel any goal I'm holding for the other person, place, or event. I'm tired of blaming others for how I feel, and I will stop suppressing my pain, work on myself, and go through the symptoms of healing. Is there any feelings that anybody's had recently towards anyone in their life that they'd like to share with the group? Don't be shy. You get your money's worth in this one. Nobody's, yeah? What do you got?
Well, my daughter's mad at me for a bunch of things. And so that's, like, I start to look at, or blaming myself actually for like, what did I do wrong as a mom that she's so mad at me?
Oh, okay. So you want to do a sheet on yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you angry at your daughter for being mad at you?
And I guess there's probably some of that too.
Okay, let's do that one.
Yeah, okay.
So what's the first line? So what we would do, I think I'm upset because my trigger. So what's her trigger in that case?
Emily?
Yeah, her daughter. So everybody can do their own sheet, or we can do Mel's sheet. So Emily, everybody put Emily in that line. It's important that you fill it out, you'll see why. And then you put your initials. Anyone need a pen? Some people behind you. Oh, there's one that's not sharp.
I don't want this to last that long.
Okay, I think I'm upset because my trigger, Emily, write your initials, right? I'm going to warn some of you, this really works. Some of you will leave here with a headache, even though that's not your daughter. This is not a game, folks, because when you actually go through line 6, you will actually call in your higher self to clear some kind of trauma. Some of you might not have any problems, but I would say in about 80% of the cases, people get a mild headache. At Waldorf schools, 100%. Okay. Did this to me. So what did your daughter do?
She got mad at me because I asked her to take the cat.
Okay, she got mad at me because I asked her a question,
Yeah,
right?
okay. Write that down.
Write that down. Everybody write it down. How did you feel? My feeling triggered?
I was, I guess, defensive, and I probably got mad at her back. So I was,
Put it down.
yeah.
Anger.
And defensiveness.
Now, the next one, number 3, Michael wants you to say, what do you really want? So, for example, what's one? I worked with my mom a lot. Since I was born, my mother has never given me a compliment of any kind, which is actually quite an achievement unto itself. So, my forgiveness sheets would be like, oh yeah, not only did she not give me compliments, she called me a lot of names. So, a lot of my forgiveness sheets about name calling. I call people names, da-da-da, so I have a problem with certain words, blah, blah, blah. Make a long story short, what do I want from my mom? Nice treatment, love, kindness. So that will go in number 3. So my trigger, like in your case, you were angry. What do you want from your daughter? What's that?
I worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't
What I
kill.
want from my daughter's death.
Understanding.
Put it down. Understanding.
Okay.
Right? You want everyone to read your mind. See how crazy you are? My daughter only read my mind, everything would be better. Right? And then she wouldn't put me in the mess I'm in. Yeah. It's good. I cancel my need for understanding. Right? And you can also cross out line 3 and 4, it's up to you. Now this,
You could put acceptance there too, right?
anything you want. Yeah. This is your sheet too. Because I'm sure we all have our Emily.
So then you cancel it, you cancel the need for that.
Yeah, you
just
literally
say-
cross it out and you're saying it too. I cancel my need for understanding. Remember, so this is the short version. Now comes the line that Prokofiev and Michael think are important, right? I invite a higher power. So in our multicultural age, you can have any god you want. Angel Jesus, Buddha Kuan Yin, my deceased aunt, right? Anything that's higher, right? Hopefully non-physical. And if you're really into Steiner, you can have your Atman come in and clear your mind. Why? Because your brain, your reactions are actually brain bound. It's not like just floating around in your heart somewhere. She reacts like that to her daughter because it's in her brain, in the carbon. So by bringing in a higher power, you're asking that carbon to be dissolved so you can actually be free, right? And that's why we become angels of freedom. So I invite a higher power to incline me towards healing, restore me to love, assist me in keeping love present, and help me in letting go of my painful reality. And you should kind of check those. You get in a rhythm. So at this moment also, you should have a sense, you should be able in some way to feel it tingling. The more you do it, the more it's more tangible. But some people are very sensitive. So this is the point where you bring in your spirit self and you ask for healing. There's no other way. If she tries to reason, oh, my daughter's a pretty good gal, I don't know why I react that way, she missed the gold. That's missing the gold. Making up a story, a stupid story, stupid, that's my keyword, is not a way to forgive, because you've just found gold. You want to cancel that. And that opens up a pipeline also to your daughter, because she just sees this confused mom who doesn't know why she's not. But when you remove that block, she can be a different person. She doesn't have to provide you with that, right? So you're freeing people in your family from this circle. So that's really key. And Michael talks about that a lot in his lectures. They're all on YouTube too. So I am grateful in line 6 to my trigger, Emily. I join with the love in you. I set a new goal with my trigger. What's your new goal with your daughter now that you gave up your old one? You wanted understanding, right? But what do you really want from your daughter?
Love.
Love. Okay, how about a conversation that's real?
Okay.
This is you. Oh, I'm so misunderstood. If she would only talk to me, I could tell her everything she... No.
Yeah.
Make a new goal that's tangible. Oh yeah, let's have a talk. I think I'm ready now that I love you and I've given up my need to be, misunderstood. Right? Any questions about that?
I'm not with you yet.
Okay, which one?
Just number 6.
So you're basically saying to your trigger, Emily, is that you're thankful, right? You're acknowledging that you have the issue, you've asked for it to be cleansed out of your head, and then what you're doing, your old goal was to be understood. Why don't you make a new goal? Now let's say you still want to be understood. Well, how do you become understood? Now have a conversation and tell her about yourself. But make it a tangible goal, or you'd like to have a great talking relationship. Your old goal was to walk around and be understood by the world. That's a crazy idea. If you want to be understood, write an autobiography, right? There's real ways, or talk to people. So you're making a new tangible goal that follows what you really want in your heart. What do you want from your daughter, really?
Well, what if my Emily is Leia,
Okay.
my daughter, and my trigger is that I would like to have a conversation with her, and that's not happening. So then what's
that's a
the next
reasonable
plan?
goal, is to now that you've freed her up from your judgment, you can actually have a conversation with her. So that you just repeat that goal. Now you're a new person because you've asked for forgiveness, for lack of a better word. So now you can reestablish that goal and pursue it as a new person. There's nothing wrong with that goal.
Except that it's not good
No,
for
because
her.
She's not
Why?
responsible.
She's not responding. She doesn't want to have a conversation with me.
Oh, that's another sheet. You have a lot of sheets to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you don't love her. She's not responding to me. That would be a whole new sheet.
She's not having the conversation. She won't.
That's another sheet. You keep doing it. You do that sheet over and over again. My mom was not going to compliment me and throw flowers at me. However, she doesn't criticize me anymore. So who changed, me or her? Okay. So you give it time. You got to give her a chance. You have to give yourself a chance to be a new person. As your field changes, because there's no pulling through expectations, things will change, and she'll change. You'll see. I remember the first time I did this work. I was working at a school, and I remember after I had done maybe 20 sheets on a person, I remember they're coming up to me, starting their whatever they do, And they looked at me confused and walked away. I was like, wow, this shit really works. Yeah. Who changed, me or them? Because I wasn't angry. I wasn't like wincing when they showed up. Yeah, you know. So yeah, everything that you say about someone is a forgiveness sheet. Ed is this, Mel is like that. Those are all forgiveness sheets. It's hard to, it's a lot of work. This is a lot of work. But when you start to clean up, you can have relationships with people you probably couldn't have before. And you'll see they'll treat you differently because you have no hook. You don't have that issue anymore. I can love my mom. She's mean to everybody else. But when I walk in her presence, I took my lumps. I always stay connected to my source. I love her, and when she's saying these horrible things to me, Mom, I gotta go, I'm not ready, you know. And I call her back, and I do more sheets, and I call her back. Now this is a person who's horribly abused. You know, this is not, I wouldn't recommend anyone else do this. But I wanted to test it. Can I be loving in her presence? Completely loving, someone who is not really very loving to me ever. Right? It's fun. You'll see. You'll win. Love always wins. Anybody else want to try another sheet? Another topic?
Well, aren't we going to go past, we started over.
Oh yeah, these are the mini sheets.
Oh, that was.
How are we doing time-wise? I went much faster than I thought I would. Any questions about this? I should slow down for a second. Yes?
I think one of the qualities that sort of is necessary to arrive at forgiveness in a relationship is authenticity. That people often get into a habitual life on the surface, and reactions and a lot of this back and forth takes place on that level. So one is trying to find a deeper level. If one gets into an argument with someone, you then in your mind, who's at fault? Is it my fault, their fault? It's like with a car accident, the police are over there trying to figure out who's at fault. But in forgiveness, you suspend that. And I think part of it is, if we get into a difficult relationship with someone, we're with them, it's difficult, but then when we leave, we don't let go of it. One is still shadow boxing with that person. And Steiner points out that all the negative thoughts we have towards a person arrive. It's like little spears that we're sending to that person that sets up the next meeting to be adversarial. So that we have to avoid that. It's like when you're not with the person, it seems, well, my thoughts are not affecting them. I can think whatever I want, but the universe doesn't work that way. It means that any sort of negative thoughts, feelings that we have an effect, have an impact. So we kind of have to dissolve our habit to do that.
Yeah.
In relation to the person that we have difficulty with. And whether they're able to do that is another story.
Right, that's a good point. Because, like, let's say you kill someone. Who do you have to forgive? You have to forgive yourself, right? So, but let's say now this is your 40th lifetime on Earth. How many people have you killed? And the question is, in a past life, did you let it go, or do you still carry it? If you still carry it, then it's going to start manifesting in your health really quickly. But karmically speaking, you can't, let's say you kill me. I can't forgive you. That doesn't make any sense. Because if I'm angry at you for killing me, it's my problem. And if you're guilty for killing me, that's your problem. So the killer and the victim have to forgive themselves. There's no other way. That's the deal. I mean, you suffer if you kill someone your next life. That's true. You pay for it. And if you're a drug addict, you suffer in this life, right? The drugs you take, right? You will always suffer. However, if I kill you, I have to do forgiveness sheets to make sure I'm not guilty, angry, and plenty of other things. There's no other way. I can't compensate you. If I give you money or I try to bring you back to life, that won't work. But if everybody does their work singly, then all those connections, you killed me, I killed you, and lifetimes repeat, he raped her and she raped him, those stop. because you just love them. You don't have that expectation. You should have been a good parent. You shouldn't have raped me. You have to let that go. There's no other way. Because if you think you're guilt karma-free from it's possible you are. Maybe you had one lifetime and you played golf and you died, and now you're here. You know, want to read Steiner because I don't know why. But, you know, that's possible, but it's highly unlikely. So the forgiveness work has to clean up. Even that murderous rage might come out when you watch seals being cloned. I want to kill the people who killed those seals. Oh, really? Do you? Where's that coming from? You got some work to do. So there's plenty of triggers. Donald Trump, my shirt, doesn't matter what it is, my accent. Look for your triggers. And if you don't clean it up, you're just suppressing it. You're waiting, oh no, I'm not mad at Ed, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's such a nice guy. That's telling a story. If you tell your story, that's when you're not doing your work.
What about, I wonder, I mean, maybe we're talking of this, but it's not.
Go ahead,
in
well, it
yet,
takes a
but,
long time.
With, what does forgiveness look like, or does it have to look like, say, with a rapist or an abuser?
Yeah.
Does, you know, that child have to be friendly with that?
No, absolutely not.
Or
No.
forgive them and be like,
Let's say
okay,
they
let's
died.
do it.
Let's say someone...
But what if they didn't? It's harder if they didn't die. You know, like if they're still in your life or
There's-
not.
Well, you know, karmically, there's a long list. Let's say someone really does it because they enjoy it. There was no karmic deal. You know, there's karmic deals. Sometimes someone abuses you, but they make a sacrifice to teach you a lesson that you pre-planned, right? So
Yeah.
you marry an abuser or you take care of an alcoholic, and that's a plan in there, and you get really hurt. But let's say there's no plan, right? And that person's still alive, they raped you, etc., right? You have there's no categorical imperative that says you have to be their friend. And as a matter of fact, it'd be smart to stay away from them. But let's say, I don't know, you go to a rally and a cop cracks your head and you hate him. Or something like that, or you get mugged. You don't have to go to the prison and shake their hands.
But what does that forgiveness look like?
That forgiveness looks like you, what's the anger you have towards the rapist, for example, or the mugger? What's your feeling that gets you out of sorts? Fear. Okay. So you just keep doing forgiveness on fear until that goes away. And you certainly don't want to pass that on to your bloodline, right? Children, family. Because that's how it works. It stays in the blood, as Goethe said. Blood is a very special juice, right? If you want to see a change in your kid, make a change in yourself first. There's no other way. People keep being like, oh, you should be like this and like this. It doesn't work. Any healer knows that. If you want to heal someone, you have to make a change in yourself. Even in psychoanalysis, they say that nowadays. Not many schools, because most schools don't read anyway. But they even say if you don't love your patient, let's say you have a child abuser as a patient, and this should be perfect for therapists because all sorts of issues come up in the therapy. You have to do your work. You can't treat someone you hate. Right?
So forgiveness in the context is letting go of the negative feelings that you have based on the experience that happened.
Exactly. And you let them go by bringing in a higher energy. And the other thing is, if you're of ill health, if you don't in some way, you have to have a pretty high frequency. Let's say you're abused, right? And you have a fear.
Mm-hmm.
You can't let that fear go unless you change your diet, exercise, mental health. Because if you were to let that fear go, who would you be? There's no way you're going to let it go. So you have to tackle it from more than the forgiveness side. The forgiveness won't work at a certain level if you're not healthy enough to let it go. Because we hold on to it. What happens if you're a totally new person who just loves everybody and trusts and intuitive? You'll be like, wow, that's so different than who I think I am. So there are next steps.
You have to prepare for where you'll be.
Especially if it's a big trauma case.
The universe, what is it? The universe hates a vacuum?
Right, yeah. Right.
So there's a vacuum there.
Including bringing in light and different kinds of meditations helps the forgiveness process. When you go to Rice has a camp. And the first thing, he traps you there for 30 days. First thing he does, he puts you on a raw foods diet. He says you don't have the vitality to forgive. Most people don't. They come smoking and bourbon and eating pizza. And, you know, it's in the middle of the countryside in Arkansas.
They got to do all this work and they're tired. They don't have the energy.
Right. Puts you on a raw food diet. And then if you're really good, he puts you on a master cleanse. And when you stop eating, eyes change color, your tongue turns pink, and you're ready to forgive, right? So there's all levels of toxicity, not only from our ideas, but from our whole lifestyle. Makes forgiveness difficult because you don't want to change. It's just natural. But yeah, you basically, as far as I can tell, hit it on the head. Yes.
Could you talk about it a little bit? So, for instance, like the child abuse and stuff like that. And forgiveness is something that really is about our feeling, our reaction, and it's for the person. But we're not saying that we condone these hideous acts of evil, that it's okay to do these things.
Right, of course not. No.
That's
It only
a
has to do with you and your reaction. So it could be to Donald Trump or Mickey Mouse
Yeah,
or abuser,
yeah.
right?
But what it does, it changes how it affects us.
Right, so what are you going to do? So you got abused, you were so small, you were defenseless, it's a horrible tragedy. But you're still you still have to do something.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can be angry all the time. You know, it's like, all I have to do is watch my mom. I know what her story is. It's a horrible story. If you knew her story, you know, the violence in the family, etc., the beatings and everything. I don't ask her to change, but I don't want to be that person who just rejects her, right? I'm just rejecting myself. I don't have to spend prolonged periods of time with her, although I did choose to do that. Because that's I wanted to do that. I wanted to love her completely.
In some families, that kind of behavior that she had would get transmitted to the children. And it just takes a conscious decision.
I think that's why Prokofiev says it's urgent. And so when he wrote these books and he would lecture on it, the problem with Prokofiev is he didn't really give you tools. You know, he said something kind of an abstraction about a spirit self entering you or a higher energy. You know, in the New Age, there's a lot of talk about that. But, you know, it's supposed to be a very concrete individual experience that you really are moving on. And I think Michael Rice made it easy. You don't need the sheets if you're willing to do the meditation. The sheets were great for me. What I found out is that every single topic in my life was one topic. And that was, when I was a kid, didn't matter if people hit me, called me stupid. And that struck a chord. My forgiveness sheets, no matter, it's somehow related to that humiliation. Shutting me down,